In the dwindling light of a late autumn afternoon, Lila stumbled through the dense forest, her breath ragged and shallow, her body weary from days without rest or proper food. The chill in the air bit through the thin layers she wore, and the weight pressing on her belly made every step an agonizing effort. Her fingers, numb and trembling, brushed against tangled branches and fallen leaves as she pushed forward, eyes scanning desperately for any sign of shelter. The world around her was a blur of muted browns and grays, the forest holding its breath as shadows lengthened and the sun dipped behind the distant hills. Lila's mind was a tempest of fragmented memories and mounting fears. She could hardly recall how long she had been wandering, how far she'd come from the city streets that had once been her home. The face of the man who had promised to stand by her now haunted her thoughts. His absence, a constant ache, a betrayal that had left her adrift and alone. And beneath it all, the fragile life growing inside her stirred, a silent reminder of hope and responsibility amid the collapse of her world. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. As her pace slowed, her eyes caught something unusual through the trees. A small structure, weathered and almost hidden by creeping vines and moss. It was a cabin, nestled in a slight clearing, its wooden walls mottled with age but still standing firm against the encroaching wilderness. The sight of it stirred a flicker of something Lila hadn't felt in days: hope. The cabin was locked tight, its door secured by a rusted latch. But to Lila, it was a beacon, a chance to rest, to find refuge from the biting cold and the dangers lurking beyond the forest's edge. She approached cautiously, every sense alert to the possibility that this shelter might be more than just abandoned wood and stone. The silence around it felt heavy, as if the cabin held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Lila's fingers trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a small broken key she had found earlier near the edge of a trail. It was a fragile thing, bent and corroded by time, but it was all she had. With a mixture of desperation and determination, she tried the key in the lock, the faint click echoing in the quiet forest like a whispered promise. The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior bathed in the soft glow of the fading daylight filtering through grimy windows. Dust floated in the stagnant air, settling on old wooden furniture and a cold hearth that had long since lost its fire. Despite the neglect, the cabin was surprisingly intact. Walls sturdy, roof secure, and a faint scent of pine and earth lingering like a memory of better days. Lila stepped inside, her heart pounding as relief washed over her in gentle waves. Here was shelter, a fragile sanctuary from the relentless uncertainty that had chased her through the wilderness. She sank onto the floorboards, exhaustion pulling her down as the warmth of the cabin, though minimal, wrapped around her like a fragile shield. The outside world, with its harsh winds and distant dangers, seemed to recede, replaced by the quiet stillness of this forgotten place. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lila allowed herself to breathe fully, to close her eyes and feel the steady thrum of life within her belly, a steady heartbeat that anchored her to the present, to the possibility of a future. Yet, beneath the relief, a flicker of unease lingered. The cabin was locked. But why? What stories had these walls witnessed? Who had lived here, and why had they left it to decay? The questions circled in Lila's mind as she surveyed the empty space, an old wooden table scarred by years of use, a rickety chair pushed askew, shelves lined with dust-coated jars and faded labels. The absence of anything personal felt like a void, a silence that both comforted and unsettled her. Her fingers traced the rough grain of the table, seeking connection, a sense of permanence she had not known in months. The baby inside her stirred again, a small kick that brought a tear to her eye, part pain, part wonder. She whispered softly, a promise she barely understood herself. "I'll keep you safe. Somehow, I'll find a way." Outside, the forest deepened into night, shadows stretching long and dark across the cabin's threshold. But inside, Lila found a fragile peace, a momentary reprieve from the relentless struggle that had defined her recent days. The locked cabin, once a symbol of mystery and isolation, now stood as a fragile fortress against the cold and the unknown. A place where hope could take root, however tentative. As she settled onto a patch of worn rugs she found in a corner, Lila's thoughts drifted back to the city streets she had fled. The faces of strangers who had turned away, the cold glances and whispered judgments, the nights spent shivering beneath bridges. All of it seemed like a distant nightmare compared to the quiet shelter she now occupied. Yet the fear of discovery, of being forced out or worse, gnawed at her. She knew this sanctuary was fragile, its protection only as strong as the will to defend it. The silence was broken only by the soft rustle of leaves outside and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. Layla closed her eyes, letting the stillness wrap around her like a cloak. She thought of the child she carried, the unknown future, the fragile life depending on her strength. In this moment, surrounded by the ancient forest and the locked cabin, she allowed herself to dream of safety, of warmth, of a life beyond survival. Her fingers found the broken key again, turning it over thoughtfully. It was a small thing, battered and imperfect, much like herself. Yet it had unlocked this door, opened a path to something new. The symbolism was not lost on her. Perhaps, like this key, she too could find ways to open doors, doors to hope, to belonging, to a future where she was not alone. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of earth and rain. Inside the cabin, Lila nestled closer to the cold hearth, gathering what little warmth she could. The night stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but for now, she was safe. The locked cabin was no longer just a mystery hidden in the forest. It was a sanctuary, a fragile promise whispered in the twilight, waiting for the dawn. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the grimy windows, casting pale beams onto the dust-coated floorboards of the cabin. Lila awoke with a start, her body stiff and aching from a restless night spent on the cold wooden floor. The thin blanket she had found in a corner barely shielded her from the chill that seeped through the cabin's cracks. Yet beneath the weariness, a small ember of relief flickered. She was still safe inside these walls, still sheltered from the biting cold and the unforgiving forest beyond. She rose slowly, hands trembling as she pushed herself upright. Every movement a reminder of the growing weight she carried within her. The baby stirred with a soft flutter, a quiet reassurance that life persisted despite the hardships. Lila's gaze drifted to the door, now closed and firmly latched behind her. The broken key, still clutched in her palm, was a fragile link to the outside world, a symbol of both her vulnerability and her resilience. The cabin, though empty, offered more than mere shelter. Its silence was filled with unspoken stories, whispered by the creaking floorboards and the faded wallpaper peeling from the walls. Lila's eyes scanned the room anew, taking in details she had missed in the dim light of the previous evening. A cracked mirror hung crookedly by the window, its surface mottled with age. A stack of firewood lay piled awkwardly near the hearth, dry but untouched. The furniture, worn and dusty, seemed to hold the echoes of lives once lived within these walls. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and necessity, Lila moved cautiously through the cabin, her steps tentative but determined. She approached a small wooden table near the hearth, its surface scarred by time and use. On it lay a scattered collection of objects: a faded photograph, yellowed with age, a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and brittle, and several glass jars, their contents obscured by layers of dust. Each item beckoned with the promise of stories waiting to be uncovered, fragments of lives that had intersected with this place long before she arrived. Her fingers traced the edges of the photograph, revealing a black and white image of a young woman standing beside a child, both smiling shyly at the camera. The woman's eyes held a warmth that seemed to reach across the years, touching something deep within Lila's heart. She turned the photo over, hoping to find a name or a date. But the back was blank, a silent testament to memories left unrecorded. Next, she opened the journal with trembling hands, the brittle pages crackling softly. The handwriting was delicate, looping, and faded, as if penned by someone who had poured their hopes and fears onto paper. Lila's eyes skimmed the words, catching fragments of entries that spoke of love and loss, of dreams deferred and moments cherished. The journal chronicled the days of a woman named Margaret, who had lived here decades ago, tending to the forest and the small garden behind the cabin. Margaret's words revealed a life marked by solitude, but also by quiet strength, a resilience that resonated deeply with Lila's own struggle. As she read, Lila felt a kinship with this unknown woman, separated by time but connected through shared experience. The journal became a lifeline, a reminder that even in isolation, life could endure and hope could be nurtured. She closed the book gently, placing it back on the table as if returning a treasured secret. Turning her attention to the jars, Lila wiped away the dust to reveal dried herbs and roots, remnants of a simpler, self-sufficient existence. The presence of these natural remedies hinted at a life intertwined with the forest, a knowledge passed down through generations. For a moment, Lila imagined Margaret gathering these plants, preparing infusions to soothe ailments or ease pain. The thought stirred a longing within her, a desire to reclaim some measure of control over her own battered body and uncertain future. Despite the cabin's offerings, a shadow of fear lingered beneath Lila's cautious hope. The forest outside was vast and unpredictable, and the locked door was a fragile barrier against the unknown. She knew that shelter alone would not guarantee safety. Danger could come in many forms: wild animals, harsh weather, or unwelcome human encounters. Her heart quickened at the thought of being discovered, of losing this sanctuary and the fragile peace it provided. With deliberate care, Lila began to explore the cabin's small kitchen nook. The shelves were bare, except for a few dusty cans and a cracked enamel pot, but the hearth stood ready to be kindled into life. She gathered dry twigs and bits of bark from a pile near the door, arranging them carefully in the cold fireplace. Striking a small stone against another, she coaxed a spark to flame, nurturing it with gentle breaths until a warm glow flickered to life. The fire's crackle filled the silence, a small triumph in the face of uncertainty. As warmth spread through the cabin, Lila prepared a modest meal from the meager supplies she had scavenged: a few stale crackers and a handful of wild berries she had picked before nightfall. She ate slowly, savoring each bite as if drawing strength from the earth itself. The act of nourishing herself was a quiet rebellion against the hunger and fear that had marked her recent days. Yet, even in this moment of calm, the reality of her situation pressed heavily upon her. The cabin was a temporary refuge, a pause in a journey fraught with hardship. The locked door that had once symbolized hope now felt like a barrier, a reminder of the isolation she faced. She wondered who had built this place and why it had been abandoned, and whether they would ever return. As the morning light grew stronger, Lila moved to the small window, wiping away grime to peer out at the forest beyond. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets she longed to understand. Outside, the world was vast and indifferent. But inside the cabin, she found a fragile stillness, a place where she could gather her strength and face the uncertain days to come. She settled back onto the worn rug near the hearth, the journal and photograph resting beside her like silent companions. The cabin, though empty and silent, had become a space of reflection and tentative hope. It was a sanctuary not just of wood and stone, but of memory and possibility, a place where Lila could begin to piece together the fragments of her shattered life. Hours passed as she sat quietly, listening to the fire's soft crackle and the distant calls of birds venturing into the new day. The baby inside her moved gently, a steady rhythm that anchored her to the present. Lila closed her eyes, gathering her scattered thoughts, and whispered a promise into the stillness. To protect this fragile life, to find a way through the darkness, and to hold on to the hope the locked cabin had given her. Days slipped by in a quiet rhythm, marked only by the shifting light through the cabin's grimy windows and the slow pulse of life within Lila's womb. The forest outside remained an untamed expanse of rustling leaves and shadowed paths, indifferent to the fragile human story unfolding beneath its canopy. Inside the cabin's weathered walls, Lila found herself drawn into a delicate dance of discovery and reflection, her fragile sanctuary becoming both a refuge and a mirror for the fragments of her past. Each morning, after the soft light of dawn spilled across the worn floorboards, Lila would rise with a mixture of hope and weariness. The journal she had found became a companion in the solitude, its pages offering glimpses into a life once lived here, a life marked by resilience and quiet endurance. She read the delicate script again and again, as if absorbing the strength woven through Margaret's words, allowing them to seep into her own resolve. The cabin's contents, though sparse, seemed to hold echoes of its former occupant's spirit. Lila began to explore more deliberately, moving beyond the initial curiosity to a careful examination of the objects around her. On a rickety shelf, she found a bundle of hand-knit cloths, their faded patterns soft beneath her fingers. She unfolded them slowly, imagining the woman who might have sewn them, the hands that had labored to create warmth from thread. A small wooden cradle sat tucked away in a corner, its surface worn smooth by time. The sight struck a chord deep within Lila. Here was a vessel once meant to hold a child, now empty but brimming with silent hope. She traced the carved edges, feeling a connection across the years to the mother who had once rocked a baby to sleep in this very place. The cradle became a symbol of possibility, a fragile promise that life could begin anew, even in the most unlikely of places. As she moved through the cabin, Lila found herself reflecting on her own journey. The fractured memories that led her here, the nights spent shivering under bridges, the harsh glances of strangers who saw only her circumstances, not the woman beneath. The weight of abandonment pressed upon her, the absence of the father who had vanished from her life, leaving a hollow ache. Yet, within the cabin's quiet walls, she began to gather the scattered pieces of her identity, stitching them together with threads of resilience and hope. The act of caring for herself became a daily ritual. each small task a step toward reclaiming control over a life that had been upended. With water drawn carefully from a nearby stream, filtered through a cloth to clear the sediment, she washed her face and hands, savoring the coolness as it chased away the grime and weariness. She tended to the cabin's hearth, coaxing the fire to life with practiced patience, its warmth a balm against the creeping chill. In the evenings, Lila would sit by the fire's glow, knitting slowly with strands of yarn she had fashioned from torn fabric found in the surrounding woods. The rhythmic movement of her fingers was soothing, a tangible act of creation amid the uncertainty. Each stitch was a small victory, a testament to her determination to nurture not only the child she carried, but also the fragile hope blossoming within herself. The cabin, once a mere shelter, transformed into a sanctuary of introspection. Lila found solace in the quiet moments, allowing herself to confront the fears and doubts that lingered beneath the surface. Memories surfaced unbidden. The laughter of a childhood left behind, the warmth of a mother's embrace long lost, the sting of betrayal that had shattered her trust. She did not shy away from these recollections. Instead, she faced them with a tentative courage, acknowledging the pain while seeking the strength to move beyond it. Amid this inner journey, the cabin's atmosphere seemed to shift subtly. The dust that had settled over years began to lift as Lila cleaned and organized, her actions breathing life into the neglected space. She arranged the shelves, placing jars of dried herbs and roots in neat rows, their earthy scents mingling with the crisp air. The small garden outside, once overgrown with weeds, became a place of quiet cultivation as she cleared debris and planted seeds she had gathered during her wanderings. This act of nurturing the earth mirrored the nurturing she promised to the life within her. Each sprouting leaf was a quiet affirmation that growth was possible, even in the harshest conditions. The cabin's walls, once silent witnesses to solitude, now embraced the tender pulse of new beginnings. But the solitude was not without its challenges. Lila wrestled with the isolation, the weight of being alone in a world that seemed vast and indifferent. At times, the silence pressed heavily against her, amplifying fears of abandonment and invisibility. She grappled with doubts, whether she was strong enough, whether she could protect the child she carried, whether this fragile haven would endure. Yet, in these moments of vulnerability, Lila found unexpected reservoirs of strength. The baby's gentle kicks became a steady rhythm, a heartbeat that anchored her to the present and the future. She spoke softly to the unborn child, whispering promises of safety and love, weaving a bond that transcended the loneliness. The cabin's locked door remained a steadfast guardian, a barrier between Lila and the uncertainties beyond. Its presence was both comforting and confining, a physical reminder of the boundary between her fragile sanctuary and the unpredictable world outside. She kept the key close, a talisman imbued with the power to open and close, to protect and to reveal. As days bled into weeks, Lila settled into a rhythm of survival and self-discovery. She learned to read the subtle signs of the forest, the changing light, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of animals. The natural world, once a source of fear, began to offer quiet lessons in resilience and adaptation. She gathered wild herbs, cautiously experimenting with their soothing properties, recalling the pages of Margaret's journal that had hinted at such knowledge. In the stillness of the cabin, Lila confronted the raw edges of her existence. She mourned what she had lost and dreamed of what might be. The locked cabin was no longer just a physical shelter. It had become a crucible for transformation, a place where despair and hope entwined in a fragile dance. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the canopy and dappled the cabin floor, Layla sat by the window, cradling her growing belly. The weight within her was a constant reminder of the life she was nurturing, a life that depended on her strength and hope. She allowed herself a rare smile, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey she had undertaken. From a frightened, homeless girl wandering the forest to a mother-to-be reclaiming her place in the world. The cabin, with its faded journals, worn cradle and locked door, had become a sanctuary not only of shelter, but of the soul. Within its walls, Lila found the courage to face the past and the uncertain promise of the future. It was a place where broken pieces could begin to mend, where the flicker of hope could grow into a steady flame. And so, in the quiet solitude of the Yao locked cabin, amidst the whispered memories and fragile beginnings, Lila embraced the slow, steady unfolding of her own story. One of survival, reflection, and the fragile hope of new life. The days grew shorter, and the forest deepened its cloak of shadows as autumn edged toward winter. Outside the cabin, the wind shifted, carrying a biting chill that seeped into the bones of the earth and whispered warnings through the skeletal branches. Lila felt the changing season pressing against the fragile sanctuary she had carved from the wilderness, a stark reminder that safety was never guaranteed, and the world beyond the locked door remained fraught with peril. Despite the cabin's shelter, the threats of the outside world hovered close, invisible yet palpable. Food grew scarce as the forest's bounty waned, and Lila learned to move with quiet vigilance, balancing the need to forage against the dangers lurking beyond the trees. The once comforting rustle of leaves became a reminder of unseen eyes watching, of creatures, both wild and human, that might not welcome an intruder in this remote refuge. One afternoon, wrapped in layers scavenged from discarded clothes and blankets, Lila ventured cautiously along a narrow path she had marked near the cabin. Her basket, woven from strips of bark and old fabric, held the meager fruits of her search, some brittle nuts, a handful of wild berries, and a few roots she recognized from Margaret's journal as edible. Every step was measured, every sound noted, as she moved between the gnarled trunks and thick underbrush. The forest was a place of contradictions, both harsh and nurturing, silent and alive. Lila found moments of solace in its rhythms, the distant call of a woodpecker tapping on ancient bark, the swirl of leaves carried on the wind, the delicate pulse of the baby within her responding to the quiet heartbeat of this wild world. Yet, these moments were underscored by an ever-present tension, a knowledge that nature's beauty could quickly turn to danger. Back inside the cabin, the scarcity of supplies forced Lila into a careful dance of rationing and resourcefulness. She preserved what little food she had, drying berries by the fire and storing roots in the cool shadows of the cellar. Each meal was a small victory against hunger, a reminder that survival required not only strength, but patience and ingenuity. The cold crept through the cabin's wooden walls despite her efforts to seal cracks with bits of cloth and mud. At night, she huddled close to the hearth's fading embers, pulling the worn blanket tighter around her shoulders and resting a hand protectively on her swollen belly. The baby's gentle kicks became a source of warmth and courage, a steady rhythm that defied the chill and the loneliness. Threats came not only from the elements, but from the occasional signs of other travelers. Footprints pressed into the soft earth near the cabin, distant voices carried faintly by the coast wind, the glint of a flashlight beam slicing through the trees. Each intrusion into her solitude sparked a surge of fear and resolve. Lila had learned to conceal herself, to hold her breath and remain still when strangers passed too close, praying they would not discover her fragile refuge. The locked door of the cabin, once a symbol of hope and security, now felt like a thin barrier against the relentless uncertainties pressing in from all sides. Lila kept the key close, a talisman of control in a world where so much was beyond her grasp. Yet, even as she clung to this small measure of protection, she knew the cabin could not shield her from everything. One evening, as twilight faded into a starless night, a sudden storm swept through the forest. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the cabin's shutters and sending cold drafts swirling beneath the door. Rain pelted the roof in relentless sheets, and the fire sputtered, fighting against the damp that threatened to extinguish it. Lila sat close to the hearth, her body tense, eyes flickering between the darkened window and the fragile flames. The storm was a stark reminder of nature's indifference to human frailty. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, drawing strength from the life growing within, whispering promises to the unborn child as thunder rumbled in the distance. The cabin shuddered beneath the wind's assault, its wooden frame creaking and groaning like a living thing struggling against the tempest. When dawn finally broke, the forest lay drenched and silent. The storm's fury spent, but its aftermath stark. Branches littered the path, and the earth was slick with mud. Lila stepped outside, the cold biting into her skin despite her layers. She surveyed the damage with a weary eye, the garden battered, the firewood soaked, the cabin's exterior marred by fallen debris. The storm had tested the limits of her sanctuary, revealing both its strength and its vulnerabilities. Lila set to work clearing the path, gathering fallen branches to replenish the firewood pile, and repairing the cabin's shutters with strips of torn fabric and hastily nailed planks. Each task was a quiet assertion of her will to endure, a refusal to surrender to the harshness pressing in from all sides. Amid these trials, Lila's inner resolve deepened. She found moments of unexpected peace in the routine of survival, in the careful tending of the fire, the rhythmic chopping of wood, the steady beat of her own heart intertwined with the life within. The cabin, battered but standing, became a testament to resilience, a fragile fortress against the encroaching cold and uncertainty. Yet, the isolation weighed heavily. The silence of the forest, once a balm, sometimes became a suffocating presence. Lila longed for human connection, for the reassurance of a friendly voice or a helping hand. The fear of discovery mingled with the hope that perhaps, somewhere beyond the trees, kindness awaited. One crisp morning, as frost glistened on the window panes, Lila noticed footprints near the cabin's edge, fresh and unfamiliar. Her heart quickened, a blend of fear and curiosity flooding her senses. She retreated within, securing the door and windows, listening intently to the sounds beyond the walls. The forest held its breath, and so did she. In these moments, Lila's strength was tested not only by the elements and the threat of others, but by the fragile balance within herself. She drew upon the lessons whispered by Margaret's journal, the memories etched into the cabin's worn wood, and the steady life growing inside her. The locked cabin was both shield and cage, a place where fear and hope coexisted in uneasy harmony. As winter's grip tightened around the forest, Lila prepared for the challenges ahead with a quiet determination. She tended the fire with care, preserved what food she could, and wrapped herself in layers of warmth. The baby's movements grew stronger, a steady pulse of life amidst the uncertainty. In the deepening cold and shadow, Lila embraced the fragile strength within her, the will to survive, the courage to hope, and the fierce love that bound her to the future. The locked cabin, battered by storms and brushed by unseen threats, remained her sanctuary, a shelter against the storm, both outside and within. The sharp crackle of twigs snapping underfoot shattered the fragile silence that had settled over the forest near the cabin. Lila's breath hitched, heart pounding as the sound echoed closer, each step a reminder that despite her efforts, the world beyond her fragile sanctuary was never truly still. She froze, listening intently, every muscle tense, every instinct sharpened by months of solitude and survival. Her eyes darted toward the cabin's lone window, straining to catch a glimpse of movement through the dense underbrush. The shadows of the early evening deepened, masking the figure that now emerged cautiously into view. A man, tall and lean, his clothes worn but clean, his hands steady as he moved with a purposeful quiet. There was a hesitance in his approach, a tension that spoke of both suspicion and concern. Lila's first impulse was to retreat further into the cabin's interior, to secure the locked door more firmly, to disappear into the shadows and remain unseen. But the exhaustion of isolation, the hunger for connection, and the faint hope kindling within her urged a different response. She swallowed hard, steadying her breath, and prepared herself to face the unknown. The door creaked softly as it opened a sliver, just enough for her cautious gaze to meet the man's eyes. They were sharp, weathered by experience, but not unkind. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace, his voice low and steady when he spoke. "I'm sorry to startle you. I didn't mean any harm." Lila's voice was barely above a whisper, fragile yet firm. "Who are you?" "My name's Jonah. I'm a park ranger. I patrol these woods. I saw signs of someone living here and wanted to check if you were okay." Her heart raced, a swirl of emotions: fear, relief, distrust, and the faintest flicker of gratitude. She hesitated, then slowly opened the door wider, allowing the chill evening air to mingle with the cabin's warmth. Jonah stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room with quiet respect, taking in the worn cradle, the stack of journals, the small fire flickering weakly in the hearth. "I didn't expect to find anyone here," he said softly, "especially a woman alone and expecting." Lila nodded, the weight of her secret suddenly more tangible between them. "I've been surviving here. It's not much, but it's safe." Jonah's gaze softened, understanding threading through his cautious demeanor. "You're brave to have made it this far on your own." For a moment, the cabin held a fragile stillness. Two strangers bound by circumstance and the unspoken truths that lingered in the air. Jonah moved closer, pulling a small pack from his shoulder and setting it on the table. "I brought some supplies, food, blankets, medical kits. I thought you might need them." Lila's eyes filled with tears, a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. She reached out, her hands trembling as she accepted the small bundle. The weight of kindness was heavy, unfamiliar, yet deeply needed. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, voice cracking. "I've been so alone." "You don't have to be," Jonah replied gently. "There are people who want to help. You don't have to face this by yourself." The words hung in the air, a lifeline extended across the divide of solitude and fear. Lila's mind raced with questions and doubts, the walls she had built around herself trembling under the weight of unexpected trust. Jonah noticed the flicker of hesitation and offered a reassuring smile. "Take your time. I'm not here to judge or rush you, just to help." Over the next few days, Jonah returned with steady regularity, bringing not only supplies, but a connection to the outside world. He guided Lila to a small clinic in a nearby town, where she received medical care and support she hadn't dared hope for. The clinic was a place of warmth and understanding, staffed by people who listened without judgment and offered assistance with quiet compassion. Each visit was a step toward breaking the isolation that had defined Lila's life. Jonah introduced her to local resources, shelters for women in crisis, prenatal classes, and support groups that promised a community she had long been denied. The locked cabin, once a fortress against the world, now felt less like a prison and more like a stepping stone towards something new. Yet, the transition was not without its challenges. Lila grappled with fear and mistrust, the scars of abandonment etched deep. She struggled to reconcile the independence she had fought so hard to maintain with the vulnerability of accepting help. But slowly, beneath Jonah's steady presence and the kindness of those she met, she began to envision a future where she was not alone. Back at the cabin, the quiet sanctuary where she had weathered storms and solitude, Lila found herself reflecting on the delicate threads that had woven her survival. The locked door that had once symbolized isolation now represented a threshold, an opening to possibilities she had scarcely dared to imagine. One evening, as the fire cast dancing shadows across the wooden walls, Lila sat with Jonah beside her, the small bundle of supplies spread between them. The baby inside her stirred gently, an intimate reminder of the life that had sustained her through the darkest days. "I'm scared," she confessed quietly, eyes fixed on the flickering flames. "But I want to believe there's more ahead for us." Jonah reached out, his hand steadying hers. "There is, and you won't have to face it alone." In that moment, the cabin felt less like a solitary refuge and more like the beginning of a new chapter, a place where trust could grow and hope could take root. The journey ahead would be uncertain, marked by challenges and fears, but also by the promise of connection and healing. Lila allowed herself a tentative smile, the weight of loneliness lifting just enough to let in the light. The locked cabin, once a barrier between her and the world, had become the place where help arrived, a quiet turning point in a story still unfolding. The days that followed Jonah's first visit unfolded in a gentle rhythm of tentative trust and cautious hope. With his steady presence bridging the gap between isolation and community, Lila began to feel the fragile threads of connection weaving around her, pulling her slowly from the shadows of solitude. The cabin, once a silent fortress, now echoed faintly with the promise of renewal. Jonah's visits became a lifeline, each arrival marked by the soft crunch of footsteps along the forest path, the rustle of his pack, and the quiet assurance of someone who came not to judge, but to support. He brought supplies, yes, warm blankets, nourishing food, clean water. But more importantly, he brought knowledge and access to resources Lila had never dared to imagine. Medical care, counseling, prenatal classes, and community support became tangible possibilities rather than distant dreams. The first time Jonah helped her navigate the small-town clinic, Lila's heart pounded with a mixture of anxiety and disbelief. The sterile brightness of the waiting room, the gentle voices of nurses, the careful attention of doctors, all felt overwhelming yet strangely comforting. She was no longer invisible, no longer just a shadow in the forest, but a person deserving of care and compassion. The medical staff greeted her with kindness, their questions gentle and their smiles sincere. They checked her health and the baby's, offering guidance and reassurance that felt like balm to the raw edges of Lila's fear. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to hope not only for survival, but for a future where she and her child could thrive. Back at the cabin, the changes were subtle but profound. Lila's steps grew steadier, her movements less burdened by exhaustion. She began to prepare small meals with renewed care, using the fresh ingredients Jonah brought, savoring the nourishment as a promise of better days. The fire in the hearth burned brighter, its warmth filling the once cold corners with light. The journals and photographs that had been her sole companions now seemed to share space with new stories, stories of kindness, resilience, and the slow rebuilding of a life once fractured. Lila kept a small notebook of her own, jotting down thoughts, plans, and moments of gratitude. Each word was a stitch in the tapestry of her healing. Jonah introduced her to a local support group for women facing crisis pregnancies. The first meeting was daunting. The room was filled with strangers, each carrying their own burdens and hopes. But as Lila listened to their stories, she realized she was not alone. The shared laughter, tears, and quiet moments of solidarity kindled a warmth she had long forgotten. She found strength in the community's embrace, drawing courage from the resilience of others. The group's encouragement helped dissolve the walls of fear and shame that had kept her isolated. Slowly, she began to envision a life beyond survival, a life where she could nurture not only her child, but herself. With Jonah's help, Lila secured a small, modest apartment in town. It was a far cry from the cabin in the woods, but it offered a foundation upon which to build. The apartment was sparse but clean, a blank canvas for new memories. The transition was challenging. The noise, the crowds, the unfamiliar routines. But Lila faced it with growing determination. She decorated the space with items she had salvaged from the cabin, the worn cradle, carefully folded cloths, and the faded photographs. These remnants of her past became symbols of continuity, bridging the old life with the new. The locked cabin remained a sanctuary she visited when she needed solitude and reflection, a place where the roots of her strength had taken hold. As her pregnancy progressed, Lila attended prenatal classes with increasing confidence. She learned about the changes her body was undergoing, the care the baby required, and the signs of labor to watch for. The knowledge empowered her, replacing fear with preparedness. The instructors, gentle and supportive, encouraged her to ask questions and share her experiences. Jonah remained a steady presence, offering practical help and emotional support. He accompanied her to appointments, helped assemble baby supplies, and shared small moments of laughter that eased the weight of uncertainty. Their bond deepened into a quiet friendship, grounded in respect and shared purpose. One crisp morning, as Lila stood in the sunlight filtering through the apartment window, she felt the baby move with a sudden, strong kick. A smile spread across her face, a mixture of awe, love, and determination. The journey had been arduous, marked by fear and loss, but this life growing within her was a testament to resilience and hope. She reached for her notebook, writing a simple promise. "I will protect you. I will give you a future." The community around her, once a distant concept, was now a tangible support network. Friends from the support group visited, bringing meals and laughter. Medical staff checked in regularly, ensuring her health and the baby's. Jonah's steady kindness remained a comforting thread woven through her days. Through it all, Lila held on to the lessons learned in the cabin. The importance of self-care, the strength found in vulnerability, and the power of connection. The locked door that had once symbolized isolation now represented a threshold crossed, a step into a future where she was not alone. As the months unfolded, Lila's confidence blossomed. She prepared a nursery corner in her apartment, arranging the cradle and soft blankets with care. She read to the baby, her voice steady and warm, sharing stories of survival and love. Each day was a building block, a reaffirmation of the life she was creating. Though challenges remained, lingering fears, moments of doubt, the weight of past wounds, Lila faced them with growing courage. She had discovered that healing was not a linear path, but a mosaic of small victories and setbacks, each one shaping the woman she was becoming. The locked cabin remained a sanctuary she cherished, a place to retreat and reflect. But now, it was no longer the sole symbol of her existence. It was part of a larger story, one of transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of human kindness. With the support of her newfound community, the steady presence of Jonah, and the life growing within her, Lila stepped into the future with cautious hope. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. The small apartment, once an unfamiliar space filled with echoes of uncertainty, began to transform with the steady rhythms of daily life. Lila found herself entwined in a growing web of connections. Women who shared pieces of her journey, friends who offered encouragement, and helpers who became pillars of support. Each interaction stitched a new layer of resilience over the fragile fabric of her past. Mornings were filled with the quiet bustle of preparation. Lila would rise early, the soft light filtering through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the modest nursery corner she had arranged. The worn cradle, once tucked away in the cabin's shadowed corner, now stood proudly beside a small rocking chair. She carefully folded tiny clothes, smoothing soft blankets with hands that trembled slightly, from a mixture of anticipation and nerves. She attended prenatal classes regularly, each session a mosaic of shared stories, laughter, and learning. The group of women she met there became a sanctuary of their own, a circle of understanding where fears could be voiced without judgment and hopes could be nurtured openly. Lila found solace in their company, their voices weaving a collective strength that buoyed her through moments of doubt. Outside the clinic, the world seemed less daunting. Lila had learned to navigate the streets with a new sense of purpose, her steps no longer tentative but steady. Jonah, ever present and patient, continued to offer a quiet steadiness. He accompanied her to appointments, helped carry groceries, and lent a listening ear when the weight of the past pressed too heavily. One afternoon, as they sat in a sunlit cafe after a routine checkup, Lila shared her growing dreams for the future. Her voice was soft but resolute. "I want to create a safe place, not just for me and my child, but for other women like me, women who feel lost and alone." Jonah smiled, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and hope. "You have the strength to make that happen, and you won't be alone in it." Inspired by this vision, Lila began reaching out to local organizations, volunteering her time at shelters and community centers. Each encounter deepened her understanding of the struggles faced by women in crisis, but also revealed stories of courage and kindness that mirrored her own. She found purpose in these connections, a way to channel her pain into something meaningful. At the shelter where she volunteered, Lila met women at various crossroads. Young mothers fleeing abuse, women battling addiction, others grappling with homelessness. Their stories, raw and unfiltered, stirred a fierce compassion within her. She shared her own journey when the moment felt right, her voice steady as she spoke of the cabin in the woods, the loneliness, and the hope that had carried her through. Her presence became a beacon for others, a living testament to survival and transformation. She offered practical advice, emotional support, and a listening heart, cultivating a community where healing could begin. The bonds she formed were fragile yet unbreakable, woven from shared experience and mutual respect. Meanwhile, preparations for her own child's arrival intensified. Lila attended childbirth classes, learning breathing techniques and pain management strategies. She assembled a bag with essentials, carefully packing items donated by friends and local charities. The nursery corner in her apartment grew brighter each day, filled with soft toys and handmade blankets. Despite the progress, moments of fear and uncertainty lingered. Lila grappled with memories that surfaced unexpectedly. A harsh word from the past, the sting of abandonment, the shadow of doubt. But she met these moments with a quiet determination, leaning on the support around her and the steady rhythm of daily life. One evening, as twilight settled over the city, Lila sat by the window, cradling her growing belly. The baby stirred, a gentle kick that brought tears to her eyes. She whispered promises into the stillness, a vow to protect, to love, to provide a life filled with safety and hope. The locked cabin remained a part of her story, a place she visited when solitude was needed to gather strength. But now, it was no longer the sole refuge. The community she had built, the friendships she nurtured, and the life blossoming within her formed a tapestry of support and resilience. As the due date drew near, Lila balanced anticipation with practicality. She coordinated with medical professionals, arranged transportation plans, and finalized details for the birth. The support group rallied around her, offering encouragement and sharing their own birth stories, weaving a network of care that embraced her fully. Through it all, Jonah remained a quiet presence, steady, reliable, and unwavering. Their relationship had grown beyond simple assistance, grounded in mutual respect and genuine friendship. He listened without judgment, offered help without expectation, and stood by her as she navigated the complex emotions of impending motherhood. In the days before labor, Lila found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the cold forest, where she first discovered the locked cabin, to the warmth of community and the promise of new life. The struggles and triumphs intertwined, creating a narrative of resilience that defined her present. The baby within her stirred again, a reminder of the fragile yet fierce life she was about to bring into the world. Lila took a deep breath, steadying herself for the next chapter. She was no longer alone. Surrounded by support, hope, and determination, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. The locked cabin, once a symbol of isolation and fear, had become a distant memory, a starting point rather than a destination. Lila's story was now one of connection, healing, and the enduring power of community. As she prepared to welcome her child, she embraced the strength she had found and the promise of a future shaped not by past hardships, but by the love and resilience that had carried her forward. The days grew shorter, and a crisp chill settled into the air as autumn deepened, painting the city streets with hues of gold and amber. Lila felt the weight of the approaching season in her bones. A stirring anticipation mingled with a quiet apprehension as her due date drew near. The journey from the solitary cabin in the forest to this moment was etched into every line of her face, every breath she took. A testament to resilience forged through hardship and hope. Each morning, she awoke to the soft light filtering through the curtains of her modest apartment, the familiar sounds of the city stirring beyond the window. The nursery corner, once a simple arrangement of a worn cradle and handmade blankets, now bloomed with the gentle chaos of preparation. Tiny clothes folded carefully, soft toys arranged just so, and a stack of books waiting to be read aloud. Lila moved through her days with a blend of purposeful calm and quiet excitement. Prenatal appointments marked the calendar, each visit a reassurance that both she and the baby were growing stronger. The medical team, warm and attentive, offered guidance and encouragement, grounding her in knowledge that transformed fear into readiness. Her support network, once a fragile thread, now wove tightly around her. Friends from the prenatal classes, women who had shared laughter and tears in equal measure, checked in regularly. Jonah remained a steady presence, his quiet strength a comforting anchor amid the swirling emotions. Together, they navigated the practicalities, assembling the hospital bag, arranging transportation, and discussing birth plans with gentle care. Yet, beneath the surface of preparation, Lila often found herself retreating into reflection. The locked cabin in the woods, the place where her journey had truly begun, lingered in her memory like a faded photograph, both distant and deeply familiar. She remembered the cold nights, the fragile warmth of the hearth, and the whispered promises she had made to the life growing within her. In moments of solitude, she would close her eyes and feel the stirrings of the baby, a flutter, a kick, that tethered her to the present and the future. The connection was profound, a silent conversation that carried the weight of survival and the hope of new beginnings. She whispered softly to the child, sharing dreams of safety, love, and a life unburdened by the shadows that had once threatened to consume her. The apartment, though humble, had become a sanctuary of its own. Lila took comfort in the small rituals, lighting a candle in the evening, tending to the plants by the windowsill, and organizing the tiny clothes with meticulous care. Each act was a thread weaving security and love into the fabric of their shared existence. As the due date approached, Lila balanced anticipation with a steady resolve. She practiced breathing techniques learned in classes, visualized the strength she would need, and prepared for the unknowns with cautious optimism. Fear lingered. Moments of doubt whispered in the quiet, but they were met with affirmations of courage and the support of those who walked beside her. One afternoon, as golden leaves drifted past the window, Lila sat with Jonah in the softly lit living room. They spoke quietly of the future, the baby's arrival, the life they hoped to build, and the challenges that lay ahead. Jonah's eyes reflected a mixture of pride and gentle reassurance. "You're ready," he said simply. "More than you know." Lila smiled, the weight of his words settling warmly in her chest. "I hope so, for both of us." The days that followed were filled with a delicate balance of preparation and patience. Lila spent time writing letters to her unborn child, promises of protection, stories of strength, and dreams of joy. She read aloud from the books gathered over months, imagining the moments they would share, the lullabies and bedtime tales that would fill their home. Though the locked cabin remained a poignant memory, it no longer defined her. It was the beginning of a journey, a starting point that had led her to courage, community, and the promise of motherhood. The shadows of the past still whispered at times, but they were softened by the light of new hope. On evenings when the city settled into quiet, Lila found herself gazing out the window, watching the world move with a rhythm that echoed her own heartbeat. The baby within stirred gently, a reminder of the life they were about to share. A life born from struggle, but destined for love. With each passing day, Lila embraced the transformation unfolding within and around her. The locked cabin was a chapter closed, replaced by a story of resilience, connection, and the enduring power of hope. As she prepared to welcome her child into the world, she carried within her the strength of all she had endured and the promise of all that lay ahead. The first contractions came softly, a gentle tightening that stirred Lila from her sleep in the early hours of a crisp autumn morning. The apartment was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights filtering through the curtains. A mixture of anticipation and calm settled over her as she reached for the small bag she had packed weeks before, the one that had sat patiently by the door, a silent promise of readiness. Her breath came steady and deliberate, the lessons from prenatal classes guiding her through each wave of sensation. The baby within shifted, responding to the rhythm of her body, a quiet companion in the unfolding journey. Jonah was already awake, his presence a reassuring anchor as he moved quietly through the room, offering gentle words and steady hands. They left the apartment together, the cool morning air crisp against their faces as they made their way to the hospital. The city was still, the streets empty save for the occasional early riser, and the journey felt like a passage from one world to another, a threshold between anticipation and new beginnings. Inside the hospital, the sterile brightness was softened by the warmth of nurses and doctors who greeted Lila with practiced kindness. She was guided to a room where the steady beep of monitors and the soft rustle of linens created a cocoon of focused care. The medical team's expertise wrapped around her like a shield, their voices calm and encouraging as they prepared for the hours ahead. Labor was a test of endurance and vulnerability, a dance of strength and surrender. Lila drew deeply on the reserves honed through months of preparation, the breathing, the visualization, the unwavering determination to bring life into the world despite the shadows of her past. Each contraction was met with focused breath, each moment a step closer to the new chapter unfolding within her. Jonah remained by her side, his hand clasping hers, his quiet presence a balm against the waves of pain and uncertainty. His words were steady, a reminder that she was not alone, that the journey was shared. The room was filled with a mixture of tension and hope, the air charged with the profound weight of creation. Hours passed, marked by the slow crescendo of effort and the unwavering support surrounding her. When the moment finally arrived, it was both fierce and tender, a culmination of struggle and love. The cries of the newborn filled the room, a piercing yet beautiful sound that shattered the silence and heralded new life. Lila's tears flowed freely as the baby was placed in her arms, a tiny, fragile being wrapped in soft blankets. The child's eyes opened briefly, meeting hers with a gaze that spoke of innocence and promise. In that instant, the weight of the journey, the cold forest nights, the locked cabin, the months of solitude and struggle, seemed to lift, replaced by a profound sense of connection and hope. They named her Hope, a name whispered softly between mother and child, carrying the weight of survival and the promise of tomorrow. The nurses smiled, the room warmed by the presence of love and new beginnings. Lila held Hope close, feeling the steady beat of her tiny heart against her own, a rhythm that anchored her to the present and the future. In the days that followed, the hospital became a place of healing and discovery. Lila learned the delicate art of motherhood, guided by nurses and supported by Jonah's unwavering presence. Each feeding, each gentle touch, each quiet moment of bonding was a step toward reclaiming a life once fractured. Visitors came, friends from the support group, medical staff, kind strangers who celebrated the arrival of new life. Their smiles and warm words wove a tapestry of community around Lila and Hope, a network of care that extended beyond the hospital walls. The locked cabin, once a symbol of isolation and fear, now felt like a distant memory, a beginning rather than an end. Lila's heart swelled with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the kindness that had carried her through, and for the life she now held in her arms. As she cradled Hope, Lila whispered promises of protection and love, vows to nurture and guide. The future was uncertain, the path ahead uncharted, but in this moment, surrounded by warmth and hope, she knew they would face it together. The story of the locked cabin had led to this, a triumph of hope over despair, of human kindness over isolation. And as Lila gazed into her daughter's eyes, she felt the enduring strength of that journey, a testament to resilience and the transformative power of love. Months later, the apartment was filled with the soft sounds of life. A lullaby hummed low, the gentle cooing of a baby, the rustle of pages turning in a well-loved book. Lila sat by the window, cradling hope in her arms, watching as sunlight spilled across the worn floorboards and warmed the small space they now called home. The journey from the cold forest shelter to this moment of quiet joy was etched into every breath she took, a testament to resilience and the enduring power of love. Hope's tiny fingers curled around Lila's thumb, her bright eyes wide and curious, reflecting the world unfolding before her. Lila smiled softly, her heart swelling with a fierce protectiveness and deep gratitude. This child, born from struggle and kindness, was a living promise, a new beginning that transcended the shadows of the past. Together, they had built more than a home. They had created a sanctuary of hope. The locked cabin, once the sole refuge against a harsh world, had inspired a vision that reached far beyond its weathered walls. Lila and Jonah had transformed that vision into reality. A safe haven for women facing crisis pregnancies, a place where stories of hardship could be met with compassion and support. The sanctuary was small but vibrant, nestled on the outskirts of town amid trees that whispered of endurance and renewal. Within its walls, women found shelter not only from the cold and the storm, but from the isolation and fear that so often accompanied their journeys. The rooms were filled with warmth, soft blankets, shared meals, laughter, and tears, woven together into a tapestry of healing. Leela moved through the sanctuary with a quiet confidence, her experiences shaping every gesture, every word. She listened deeply to the women who arrived, their stories echoing fragments of her own past. In their eyes, she saw reflections of pain and hope, despair and determination. She offered more than just shelter. She offered empathy born from lived experience, a hand extended across the divide of loneliness. Jonah remained a steadfast partner, his care and dedication a constant presence. Together, they navigated the challenges of running the sanctuary, securing resources, organizing support groups, and building connections within the community. The work was demanding, but each small victory, a woman finding stability, a child born into safety, infused them with renewed purpose. The community, once hesitant, began to embrace the sanctuary and its mission. Local businesses offered donations, volunteers arrived with open hearts, and the stories of transformation rippled outward, inspiring others to contribute. Lila and Jonah's vision blossomed into a network of kindness, a living legacy of compassion forged from adversity. As hope grew, so did Lila's confidence as a mother and advocate. She balanced the demands of parenthood with the responsibilities of the sanctuary, weaving a life rich with meaning and connection. The challenges remained, moments of doubt, the weight of past wounds. But they were softened by the support that surrounded her. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Lila sat with a group of women around a wooden table, sharing stories and laughter. Hope lay nestled in a bassinet nearby, her eyes bright with wonder. The room was alive with the warmth of shared experience, a testament to the healing power of community. Lila's gaze traveled to the window, where the distant silhouette of the locked cabin stood against the sky, a symbol of beginnings and resilience. She thought of the cold nights spent within its walls, the whispered promises made in solitude, and the journey that had carried her here. Her voice, steady and filled with quiet strength, broke the soft hum of conversation. "This sanctuary is more than a building," she said. It's a promise that no one has to face their struggles alone, that kindness can build bridges where there were once walls, and that hope can grow even in the hardest places. The women nodded, their faces reflecting the truth of her words. In that moment, the sanctuary was more than a refuge. It was a family, a chosen family bound by shared pain and shared hope. Years later, as Lila watched Hope take her first steps in the garden behind the sanctuary, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey from a locked cabin in the forest to this vibrant community of support had been marked by hardship and healing, loss and love. Hope's laughter echoed through the trees, a bright light in the afternoon sun. Leila reached out, catching her daughter's hand, their fingers intertwining like the threads of a tapestry woven through time. The story that began in solitude had blossomed into one of connection, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the extraordinary power of unconditional love. It was a story still unfolding, carried forward by the lives they touched and the hope they nurtured. And in the heart of it all stood a woman who had once been lost, now found, a mother who had fought for a future, and a community that thrived on the promise of kindness and belonging. The locked cabin, once a symbol of isolation, had become the foundation of a legacy of hope, healing, and the enduring strength of chosen family.